I'm going to be doing a complete sew up from start to finish on the brand new pegs. They have a really fun color block diagonal piece on the thigh, and they also have a really cute kind of pointed heart-shaped contoured waistband. So grab your fabric and let's get started. Alright guys, here we are. I have a few different colors I'm using on these leggings, so I'm actually going to use a few different machines. Hopefully I don't make you sick swiveling around here. What we're going to do first is, this is all my back pieces, so my back bottoms, my back middle piece, and my back top piece, and I'm just going to stitch those all together. They have notches to help make sure you're creating two mirror images. So here's my bottom, and it's got a notch right here. I'm going to grab my middle one and align it with the notch that matches. This really helps make sure you grab the right piece, because a lot of times athletic knit like mine is really hard to tell the front and the back. And it's really easy to kind of accidentally grab that wrong piece and accidentally end up with two right legs instead of a right and a left leg. This also has a lot of pieces that you're piecing together, and so you don't want to end up with the wrong pieces in the end. So there's my notches aligned, and I'm going to use this machine for this one. Again, I have a couple different machines set up with different fabric colors because I couldn't decide how dark I wanted the thread, since I'm going from white, medium to very dark fabric. So this one's kind of my medium. You can top stitch this right here. I'm going to go ahead and add on the other one, the top piece. Again, these are all back pieces. You'll see your notches way over here on the side. So I'm going to grab my piece, just making sure I'm putting right sides together on here. It's important that you line these up at the seam allowance here and not at the edge. If you do it at the edge, you're going to have a section of this blue that doesn't match up. So this is my little notch right here to show you exactly where that seam allowance is. So that's where you want the edges to align, the sides. Both of them have like a little notch, and you just want to make sure that those line up. Otherwise, when you stitch your ½ inch seam allowance and you flip them right sides out, you might have not a very smooth transition from piece to piece. I'm going to move and go on this machine now. It has my darker thread. Using a serger like me, make sure you're using the full ½ inch seam allowance. So as you can see, I'm trimming off about 1/4 inch. It's really important, especially with the color blocked option like this and the side panel color blocked option of the pegs. If you use the smaller seam allowances, those really add up. You know, this could end up much longer. If I used a 1/4 inch seam allowance, it would add a full inch to the inseam, which is quite a lot. Okay, so now we have one back leg. I'm just going to repeat on the other back leg, and I'm going to speed it up a little bit so you hopefully don't get bored watching me. Okay, now we have two back legs. Just going to put those to the side and work on the front legs now. It's the exact same process. You have 2 mirror image of the lower leg, 2 mirror image of that thigh kind of area, and then 2 mirror image of your top pieces. And here we are, we're just going to repeat the exact same thing, making sure we have our notches aligning nicely and that we are always putting right sides together when we're stitching. These pieces, especially these little thigh pieces, can be really easy to get messed up. So here my notches aren't aligning. So this is the wrong piece. This isn't the piece that I'm supposed to have. That's going to go match my other lower leg. So I'm going to put this right sides together. Make sure your right sides together. You know what? And I think that's what I was doing wrong on this one. I don't think I had it right sides together. Okay, let's try again, making sure we're right sides together, and now we're matching. So that's why I put all of these notches. I know it's a lot of notches to kind of cut out and match up, but without them, some of these pieces, especially this little thigh piece I found, is shaped so similar on the top and the bottom. It's really hard to make sure you're putting it on correctly without them. So do not skip the notches, or you can very, very easily put, you know, the wrong diagonal piece. Okay. Here we go. We're right sides together and matching the notches. Make sure you're lining up your side at the seam allowance. You should not have to stretch any of these pieces. They should align and sew up perfectly without any stretching. I'm going to repeat on the other leg. Again, I'm going to speed it up so you don't get too bored watching me do the same steps again. Okay, I'm just going to pan you over here now to show you one more time what we have. We have 2 fronts that are mirror image. And then we have 2 back pieces that are also mirror image. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lay the back pieces face up, and then I'm going to match them with their correct leg. So my front, I'm going to face down and just match the right leg with the right leg and the left leg with the left leg. And now I'm just going to sew up the inseam and the outseam. So I have them right sides together. We're going to align them here to crotch, and then we're going to align each seam, and you can press your seams up or down, whichever you think will be more comfortable. I usually press mine down. If you top stitched, you would have already had to decide that. There you go. Alright, so I'm going to do the inseam first. I am actually going to sew this top dark part on my dark serger, and then the bottom half that's lighter on my lighter serger. I really like my tight fit activewear or swimwear to match because it gets stretched so much. You almost always see a little bit of the serger thread colors. So I'm going to be a little bit extra and do that. Especially since I'm not top stitching, If you're top stitching, it's not as important because when it stretches, it's going to keep that stitching covered. I actually really like to top stitch my activewear usually. I'm just going to open these up and show you what they look like now. This is the inseam. Your V's should align. So now I'm just going to fold them right back over where they were again. And this time I'm going to pin or clip on the outseam. So the top side seam, and then again at all of these matching seams. One thing I'll mention that gets asked a lot is a lot of times your inseam will feel like it's a little bit off, and that's because the crotch curves are so drastically different. The booty curve is much, much deeper than the front, and so you have to ease in the back to the front a little bit. Preferably you want to ease in versus stretching. Like stretching the shorter one, you want to ease in the longer one, but easing in means you're forcing the longer one to fit to the smaller one versus stretching the smaller one to fit the longer one. In general, it's much better to ease something in versus stretching. Stretching will often give you kind of wavy seams, where easing in will not. And you'll see that on all pants, not just active or tighter fit leggings like these ones. You'll see that on just all pants in general. The back has a much deeper crotch curve, and so you'll see that. Alright, so I actually stitched up my other leg. So here's one leg, here's the other, they're mirror image. I flipped this one right sides out, and I'm going to leave this one wrong sides out. And I'm going to take the one that's right sides out and feed it into the one that's wrong sides out. This will put your right sides of your two legs together. That's what you want. They should match up identical. Okay, let's find, where's my seams? Okay, there we go. Just gonna give it a shake to make sure they're all matching up. The front and back are a little bit trickier to tell the difference on these new Colorblock ones, these new diagonal ones. And that's because usually the back comes up much higher than the front, and that's really easy to kind of distinguish between. This one, what you have to look for is that curve. This one has that kind of heart-shaped V curve to the back. And it comes much lower than most pants do because it has that little V shape. So that's why it's not much taller like normal. But here's the front. It's nice and squared off. And here's the back. It's got that kind of heart curved into a V. Again, my pants are right sides together. And what I'm pinning is just the crotch curve. So again, here's the front. It's nice and squared off. We're going to be sewing along the crotch curve to the inseam up to the back booty curve. We will not be stitching around the top, so leave that alone. Okay, I'm going to go to my darker serger here. This is a seam that I really like to top stitch normally when I'm not doing videos. The pegs have about 20% negative ease at the highest measurement on the measurement chart, except for right across the widest part of the booty, it's a little bit higher. So right across the widest part of the booty is where you'll be stretching your fabric the most, which is about right here. And so that's why I really like to top stitch this seam, is because it really shows where they get the most stress, where they're stressed or stretched the most. And stuck my hand in there and flipped them right sides out. Here's our front, and here's our back with that little heart shape. We're just gonna throw them off to the side. All those need is hemmed before the bottoms are completely done. And I'm gonna grab all my pieces for my contour waistband. So what I have here is a back lining and a front lining. I did this lighter color for the lining. And then I did a pocket option one. So here's my front piece. It looks very similar to the lining. The lining is a little bit shorter, just by a little bit. And all that does is kind of pull the lining down and the main kind of over to the underside so that it doesn't peek out ever. Okay, and then for my back piece, since I did the pocket, I have the center piece for the pocket option, my side pieces for the pocket option, and then I have my pockets. So I chose to do both pockets. You do not have to do both pockets. You could just do one. So you could just do this big. I would recommend the bigger one if you're only doing one, because it fits a phone, a pretty generous size pocket here. And then you can do two if you like to. That way you can fit kind of like a phone or keys, and then something smaller, maybe like a key card or a small locker key, something like that, a credit card. And it kind of just has this really fun little color block. And I'm going to grab some fold over elastic. You can hem these pockets if you just want to turn them under 1/2 inch and hem. I'm actually going to use some fold over elastic. I'm going to use 1 inch. It really doesn't matter what width you have. I'm just using the 1 inch because I happen to have it on hand for some fierce bras. You're going to cut it exactly the same width as the top of the pocket that you're doing. So now I kind of have all the colors in my pocket, which is fun. If I hemmed it under, I'd kind of miss that white, I think. I think it's fun to kind of do up all the different colors. Of course, whatever you want. The fold over elastic does make the pocket hold really nice and tight. Excuse me. It's very stable. And so once you stick something inside the pocket, you know, it kind of pulls above whatever you stick in, and it holds it really nice and tight. So one little, I guess, advertisement for using fold over elastic. Make sure that both your pocket pieces are right sides up when you're cutting them. And of course you could do it however you want. You could do it like this, where they're both diagonal this way. Or you can do it like this, where one kind of slants to the right and one slants to the left. Whatever you like. It's all about, you know, having fun and doing whatever you want. I kind of prefer that. I cut mine like this, where it kind of slants both ways. But it would be, some of our testers did them where they both go the same way, and it's also very cute. One thing about the fold over elastic that is a little bit more daunting is that it's much thicker to sew these seams right here. putting this fold over elastic inside out on accident. That would be silly. Alright, so I'm just going to pin this on, and I'm going to stitch it on my sewing machine with a triple step zigzag. Alright, here we are with kind of a bird's eye view. Again, I'm going to do the triple step zigzag. It's my favorite top stitching on something super fitted. I use it all the time on athletic wear and swimwear. Okay. Again, I cut mine out to kind of slash back and forth. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to baste these together with my center piece. So here's my center piece. To make sure it's right sides up. It is a symmetrical piece, so it would be easy to flip upside down on accident. I'm going to put some pins in place, and then I'm just going to go around with the basting stitch, which is the longest straight stitch that your machine does. And it's just to temporarily hold these pieces together so nothing slips and slides as you're stitching this curved piece, especially since there's so many layers with the pockets. You want to make sure you're getting all of those layers. One's not slipping and sliding out of place. Okay, and I'm just going to go around that with a basting stitch. We're going to do a pretty small allowance, about 1/8 of an inch, because along the bottom it's only 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, and I don't want to have to remove this stitch. Now, if you don't mind removing your stitch, you can do a bigger allowance there. Okay, so there's all of our pockets all ready to go. I'm going to grab my 2 side pieces on the back. Make sure I have them right sides together, and this is how they go. So these 2 straight edges kind of meet, and I am going to pin and zip down these. This is the seam that gets a little bit thick with a fold over elastic right here, so make sure you go nice and slow. Top stitch right there can help a lot. Alright, I'm going to move to serger. There we go, and now we have our full back piece. Okay, now that our back piece is ready, we're just going to grab our main fabric on the front. This is also a symmetrical piece, so make sure you're grabbing that right side for right side together. I'm going to pin up the side seams. The front is smaller than the back, as you can see. That's okay. Right, there we go. And I'm going to zip up these side seams now. Alright, now our main waistband is done, and let's stitch up the lining so we can put them together. So here are my two linings. They're gonna look a lot alike. The front is very, very similar, and then the back looks like the back piece once you get all of those pieces together. Or if you're not doing the pockets, your main back waistband is gonna look just like this. It's just gonna be slightly taller. Again, the lining is slightly shorter. Make sure I have right sides together. I'm going to stitch up these side seams right here. Okay. You're going to leave your main or your lining, one of them right sides out, one of them right sides together. Doesn't matter which one. The one that is right sides out, you're going to put inside the one that is wrong sides out. Just like our two legs and when we sewed up our bottoms. So now these are right sides together. And we're going to align them at their side seams. Now remember, your lining won't have any seams for a pocket if you did the pocket. I'm going to put in a couple more pins just all the way around the top, kind of top center, or front center, and back center maybe. And we're going to stitch all the way around the top. To nest my seams on the side seams, which means push the lining to the front and the main to the back, or vice versa, on your seam allowances. It gives a tiny bit smoother seam when you have one facing one way and one facing the other. Okay, so now I'm just going to flip it right sides out, and I'm going to go ahead and put the lining inside, and our waistband is done. There we go. Since the lining is a little bit shorter, once you pull to meet these edges, the lining should kind of tuck down just a tiny bit, and that way, even if you don't top stitch, your lining shouldn't ever peek out. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to baste these together. And that way, when I go to attach, I just don't have to worry about anything slipping and sliding. It's just much easier, especially with athletic knit that tends to be a little bit slicker already. I go ahead and trim some of my serger tails. Okay. Now we're ready to attach our waistband to our pants. Grab my pants. We're going to start with the back. Since it has this kind of curved V right here, can be a little bit trickier to sew. That's why it has a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I find it easier with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I really like to use my serger for construction on athletic wear. And so I made it a quarter of an inch. All right, here we are. I've got my waistband right sides. The light blue is my lining. Right sides to my leggings. This is the back with the curved kind of, it's almost like a heart shape. And I'm just going to pin the 2 points, the point of the V together. Just like a V-neck, you're just kind of move these to where you can align the edges on both sides and pin. And we're just going to baste that little V and make sure it's nice and perfect with no puckers before we move on. I absolutely recommend this step. You do not want to skip this step. If you do, the chances of you not being happy with this V are very high. So I'm just going to baste it my longest straight stitch. And just a couple inches on each side of this V. You don't need to do a whole lot. You just want to make sure this V is right where you want it. I'm going to do just inside 1/4 inch. Our seam allowance for attaching the waistband to the legging is 1/4 inch. So I'm doing just past that. I'm actually going to go all the way off the V, and I'm going to start on this side and go across. I find that easier than trying to get an exact spot to put my needle down and pivot. You can do that. The only reason I find it difficult is when you're basting, those stitches are so long that I can never quite get it perfect enough for myself. Okay, so I basted in white. There you go. And now I can flip this over and I can just make sure that it's exactly how I want, right? So I can make sure that V is right in the middle of my seam. And remember, I went past, so there's my V. Okay, and I can make sure there's no puckers or anything. If it looks good, then you can flip it back around just how you had it, right sides together, and pin in a few more spots around the waistband. The waistband does very slightly stretch to the legging, not very much. Since the pegs are already pretty fitted and tight, the waistband doesn't stretch very much. Versus like a youth legging that might not have as much negative ease, which you might stretch the waistband more. Something like the petite pegs don't have as much negative ease through the legs of the legging, and so the waistband needs to stretch to fit quite a lot. The pegs have so much negative ease built into the main legging part that the waistband doesn't need to be that fitted, that tight, that much tighter than the leggings, I guess. So I just made sure to get that front center and then pinned it around evenly. I'm going to move to my serger over here, and I'm just going to zip around. It's only 1/4 inch seam allowance here. I did that because this V is a lot easier to get sharper and crisper on a serger with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I really like to use my serger for athletic apparel. So I like to start at 1V and just go up one side, around the whole legging, around the whole circle, and down the other side. Again, I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I basted my waistband all together, so I'm only having to make sure that basted stays together and my legging. Trim off those serger tails. And here's my center front notch. And my waistband. I always cut a center notch, even if it's not on the pattern. Anytime something's on the fold, I usually cut a center notch. I always do if I know I'm going to have to find the center of something while I'm sewing. getting to the other side of this V, and I'm just going to zoom you in a little bit. I already came up this side with 1/4 of an inch, and now I'm just going to go down this side. It's important to make sure you don't have any puckering or anything under here on this little V. And that's why you really want to baste and make sure that your basting stitches look good before, because it makes it easier not to get any puckering if you do baste. So there's my little basting that I did at 1/4 of an inch. Okay, I picked out my basting stitches right along the edge. I didn't pick out my basting stitches all along the waistband. I just pull it, let them pop, and I leave them in there. You can pull them out if they bother you, but all I do is pull them so that I don't hear the popping when I put them on for the first time, because that can be a little nerve-wracking to hear popped stitches when you pull them on. So I just pull them, and unless they happen to pop out somewhere, I just leave it in there. So you can't really see them anywhere in there. There we go. You can also top stitch this if you would like. You can really top stitch any of these. There we go. Found one more little basting stitch in there. And you're almost there. The only thing we have left is hemming. So let's get to it. The bottom. Now, when I was first beginning sewing knits, I would struggle a little bit hemming knits. And my advice for those who are just learning how to sew with knits or are new to sewing, period, if you are struggling hemming your knits, here are a few things that I found super helpful. One, do not skip pressing. Press, press, press. It will make it easier. Now, I'm using a nylon spandex. Nylon does not like high heat. It will melt with high heat. So if you're using a nylon, careful. Use a pressing cloth and not a high heat, like a synthetic setting. If you're using like a cotton spandex, crank up the heat, crank up the steam. It will leave a nice press with a really nice crease, and it will really help you when you're at the sewing machine. I'm going to stitch these on my sewing machine. A lot of times I will use my cover stitch. I love my cover stitch, but a sewing machine works just great. I have not a matching color in my bottom, so I'm gonna sew from the right side. Usually when I stitch on my sewing machine, an advantage is that you can stitch seeing this and right on the very edge, but since I'm not going to change my bobbin, I'm going to stitch from the top side. I like to use a triple step zigzag. It's one that you cannot backstitch on. It's also extremely stretchy. I really like it for athletic wear and swimwear. If I ever have to top stitch on elastic or anything like that, something super stretchy, it's my go-to super stretchy stitch. I don't have to change this factory settings. You can, of course, change them, but I find the factory settings look nice and are incredibly stretchy. So One thing, if you're a beginner, you really do not want to stretch your fabric. If anything, you almost want to push your fabric through, just not getting any creases. You really don't want your fabric to stretch as you're sewing it. One thing that helped me a ton when my power went out. So there's the pause, and it changed my stitch. I forgot to change it back. Okay. So my power went off, but I'm back again and finishing the hem on these leggings. Hopefully it doesn't go out again on us. But one thing that helped me a whole lot when I was first starting to sew and sew with knits especially, is when I was hemming, I would use something to stabilize the hem, like a wash away hem tape. This helps so much because what it does is it stabilizes your fabric and it keeps it from stretching out. It will not allow you to stretch it out. The stabilizer does not stretch, so your fabric cannot stretch, and you get wash away so that after you're done hemming and you wash it, then your hem can still stretch. Okay, I'm going to finish these up real quick. Okay, so we're all done. We have a complete pair of leggings here. We have a nice tall contoured waistband with lining that peeks under, if you can see. It just gets pulled to the back a little bit naturally because it's shorter. We have the double pocket on this one, the heart shape on the waistband, some cute color blocking, and hemmed up with a nice stretchy stitch that won't pop when you put it on. Alright, you guys, I hope you enjoyed sewing along with me. I hope you enjoy the new Peg Legs addition to the Pegs family. We really wanted to just share something positive that can give a smile to you guys during this rough year, and I hope it does. I hope you have a smile on your face when you sew them up, when you try them on, and when you post them. Don't forget to post them so we get to see your smile and smile along with you. Alright guys, good luck!